You guys could just sit down right here on the pew, okay? Thanks. Yeah, make a little room there. Scoot a little closer. Pretend like you like each other. Come on. Hi, thank you. Good to see you guys. Do you guys ever get hungry? Yeah. You're a very picky eater. Okay. You're picky. What do you like to eat, Scarlett? Treats.
I like to eat peanut butter and jelly.
Peanut butter and jelly, yeah. Any other favorites? What? Candy. Candy? What do you like to eat, Reagan? If you think of something, you can tell me. How about you, Corbin? What do you like to eat? M&M's.
I do like to.
Yeah. So the most nutritious thing we have up here today is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It's pretty good.
I like that too. I like bananas.
Yeah.
I like peanut butter and jelly too.
Okay. So do you guys get hungry a lot?
Oh yeah.
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 Oh yeah. Okay.
My parents call me Rolly.
What?
My parents call me Rolly.
Rolly? What is that? Call her Rolly? Okay, all right. Does that lead to roly-poly? Is that what that is?
Yeah, I watched that too.
Okay. So when you guys get really hungry, probably multiple times a day, what is the thing that makes you not hungry anymore? You eat something. Exactly right. Okay. You just get some more later, yeah. I know.
When you are tired, you don't eat any more food.
When you're tired, you don't eat any more food. That's the only time they stop eating is when parents finally get them to bed and they sleep. Yeah. God is gracious. That's why he made us to need sleep, so that the eating can stop. That's right. Yeah. How about you? We didn't get to talk to you yet. What do you like to eat? Just whatever your parents put in front of you? Okay.
What my dad does.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, I want to tell you something, that what we're going to look at today in the Word is that Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Do you guys like to eat bread?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Why do you think Jesus said, I am the bread of life?
I don't know. That's funny.
That is kind of funny. It's strange, yeah.
Daddy.
Yeah.
And Poppy say, unicorns.
So today we're going to find out when Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Why did he say that? Because Corbin's right. That's a strange thing. And actually the people that heard that first thought that was really strange too. Okay? And some people like what he had to say, and some people didn't like what he had to say. But I think he said, I am the bread of life, because he says, you know how you like to eat bread or M&Ms or whatever else, you know? That
Because he made all the food
yeah,
for us.
God made all the food for us. That's exactly right. Okay? I had a really good conversation about how God invented pizza. Okay? And it's true, because
Pizza's my favorite.
pizza's my favorite too, man. Okay. Pizza right here. Okay. All right. So God made pepperoni, he made tomato sauce, he made the dough, he made the cheese, he made all of that. And then he gave people the idea of how to make those pizzas and put it all together. So God invented pizza.
Daddy.
Pretty cool. All right, so what we want to concentrate on today is Jesus says, I am the bread of life, because when we consume him, when we take him into our hearts and lives,
Daddy.
we're full, we're filled. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, any parting words? Any final good things to say?
He always gives us lammies.
Yeah, he gave us lammies too. Yeah.
And we have a big Bible about all the stories.
Good, good. Hopefully every family has a big Bible at home. Yeah. Okay, thank you guys. Why don't you guys go back to your families now, and we'll talk about Jesus, the bread of life, okay? Last week we looked at Jesus making the statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus makes a bunch of other statements also in the Gospel of John. Today we're looking at, as you just heard, I am the bread of life. But Jesus also says in other places, I am the light of the world, I am the gate, or I am the door, I am the good shepherd, I am the resurrection and the life, and I am the true vine. So there's 7 places in the Gospel of John where Jesus makes these statements. There's some other things he says in the Gospel, but these are the ones we're focusing on especially. So when Jesus makes these statements about himself, in essence, he's kind of drawing a line in the sand, right? Do you believe that what I said is true? Are you going to stand on my side or over there? When Jesus says, I am this, I am that, he's talking about who he is. He's talking about his character. He's talking about his authority. So John is laying this out because at the end of the Gospel of John, he gives us his theme, the reason he wrote the Gospel. In John 20, verses 30 and 31, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So John shares these stories of Jesus, and especially these statements that Jesus makes about himself, so that we may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. That's his goal in his gospel. That's what God wants us to do, is to believe on his Son. So we're going to look at this next phrase today here about Jesus being the bread of life. And we're going to kind of take this in some sections here, but the first section we're looking at are the first 40 verses. I'm actually just going to handle the first 15 and then talk about that for a minute. So John 6, verses 1 through 15. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat? He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many? I think his name was Corbin, I'm not sure. Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. And Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost. So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, this is indeed the prophet who has come into the world. Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Okay, let's talk about this for a minute. At this point in Jesus' ministry, things are going really well. He's got lots of really big crowds following him. Okay, they've seen some incredible things. People are always after a good show, right? We want to see something exciting. When I was a kid, I still remember the first time I went to a circus that was in Boise at the time, and it blew me away that elephants could do these things and that there were lions there, and that the guy on the motorcycle went around and around inside the metal sphere, and people were up on this line across there, walking across there and not falling. And these things were amazing to me. I wondered, where did circuses go, by the way? I don't know of any circuses anymore. And I think it's because we're not wowed by them anymore. We've seen it all. Actually, if you've got YouTube, who needs a circus, right? We see these things and we're not impressed anymore. But crowds like to see amazing things, and so the crowds have seen Jesus do all kinds of things so far in his ministry. He's been healing lots of people. There were deaf people that all of a sudden could hear. There were people that couldn't speak that Jesus loosed their tongue. There were people that were blind and Jesus gave them sight back again. There were crippled people who could not get up and walk that Jesus healed, and all of a sudden they could get up and click their heels and walk away. Jesus did all of this. Jesus cast out demons too and made people who were unclean clean. And these people in John 6 wanted to see more. Jesus had done all this stuff. Now let's go hang out with him and find out what else Jesus is going to do. So Jesus, he's worn out. I don't know if you're like me, but when you've been around lots of big crowds for a while, eventually you're like, okay, I got to pull back. I got to find myself again. Jesus is the Son of God, but he's also very human. And so Jesus is worn out from the crowds that are always around him, and he goes up onto a mountainside to catch a break. But as usual, the crowds are like, hey, there's Jesus up there, let's go. And they all go up and they follow Jesus up onto the mountainside too. So all these crowds come in, and Jesus asks his disciples, okay, all these guys, all these people are coming together, these crowds of people, they got to be hungry. What should we feed them? And I wish I had an illustrated Bible of what actually Jesus looked like. I bet when he said, what should we feed these people? I think he had a smirk on his face. Because John said here already in the gospel, Jesus knew what he was going to do. Okay? What are we going to feed all these people? He knows what he's going to do, but he asks them. And Philip, who's baffled, says, 6 months' wages wouldn't be enough to feed all these people. Just a little bit. That wouldn't be enough. And the smirk on Jesus' face tells us Jesus knows where he's going, what he's going to do. And he wanted this reaction out of Philip and the other disciples. And Jesus is going to do something here that is talked about for a while afterwards. And so here we see Andrew, who is Simon Peter's brother, and he sees this boy there. I don't know, all the crowds are around, and he sees this boy who's got a little sack lunch that his parents prepared for him. Not a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, Everly, but a little lunch with some fish and with some barley loaves. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And I don't know if he actually thought this could help, or whether he's just, like, okay, well, here's a kid's lunch. Maybe that'll help us, I don't know why he said that. But he does say, what is this among so many people? And then Jesus gets to work. And Jesus says, let's get all of the people to sit down. And that's no easy task. I don't know how many people we're talking here. John gives us a figure. He says 5,000 men. There's 2 ways to think about this. Either that's 5,000 men as in humans, people, 5,000 people. Or he could be saying 5,000 men, not counting the women and children that are there, which could be 20,000 people as an estimate. I don't know, but either way, 5,000 people or 20,000 people, trying to get everybody to orderly sit down without a megaphone, pretty impressive. Okay, Jesus first gets everybody to sit down there. And then Jesus does something amazing. He takes that little boy's loaf, the lunch, the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. He takes them, and he gives thanks, and then he gives the food to everyone who was seated there. All 5,000 or all 20,000? All thousands. Even if it's 5,000, that would be an incredible feat to take that little boy's lunch and feed them all. John says everyone had enough to eat, as much as they wanted. Okay, it was all you can eat, buffet, fish and bread. Maybe not a lot to choose from, but still, everybody had as much as they wanted. And there were leftovers. People could go with a little doggy bag or whatever afterwards. Everybody had extra. They had so much. And Jesus says, gather up all the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost. This is a miracle that was done by God. It's precious. And there were 12 baskets left over after all of that. Now, there's a small subtlety in the text here that we could easily miss. This story is told in all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But there's a small difference in them, and I want to highlight that right now. Matthew 14:19 says, he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. Mark 6:41 says, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. Luke 9:16 says, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke them, and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. Then John 6, verse 11 says, Jesus took the loaves. When he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. Did you notice the difference? Matthew, Mark, and Luke all say Jesus took it, and he blessed it, and he gave it to the disciples, and the disciples handed it out to all the people. In John, it says he took it, he blessed it, and he gave to all the people. Now, that could have still been that he gave it to his disciples and gave it to all the people. Therefore, John is still saying it true that he gave it to all the people. It just happened through his disciples. But John writes it differently because he wants us to see this differently. He wants us to see Jesus differently, that Jesus himself multiplied this and he himself gave it to all the people. Why does he want that? Well, I don't think he just forgot, like, oh yeah, I forgot to put in that the disciples did this. I don't think it's that. I think he wants us to see here when Jesus says, gather up the fragments left over, that nothing should be lost. In this story, we're seeing bread is special. This bread is more than just bread, it's life. Okay? So keep that in mind, and let's go back to our text and read a little bit more. Look at John chapter 6, and we're going to start at verse 22. 22 through 34. On the next day, the crowd that remained on the other side of the sea saw that there had been only one boat there, and that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but that his disciples had gone away alone. Other boats from Tiberias came near the place where they had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. So when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves got into the boats and went to Capernaum, seeking Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you come here? Jesus answered, Truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has set his seal. Then they said to him, What must we do to be doing the works of God? Jesus answered them, This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. So they said to him, Then what sign do you do that we may see and believe you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Jesus then said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. They said to him, Sir, give us this bread always. So Jesus and the disciples try to sneak away again, right after this big thing. Jesus was tired before that moment where he fed thousands of people from a little boy's lunch. Jesus wants to pull away again to kind of focus in on him and his disciples and maybe catch his breath. But the crowds again find Jesus. I don't know if they were sleeping or what, but they kind of, hey, wait, where'd Jesus go? Where's his disciples? I don't see it. They're gone. Let's find them, And they look, oh, he's over there. So all the crowds, they all chase over there to find Jesus again. And the crowds asked Jesus, where were you? How did you get here? Jesus knew their hearts. He says, look, you're not interested to be here with me because you want to learn from me. You're here because you got a free lunch. You want more stuff. The bread I gave you yesterday was special, but don't miss the point of who gave it to you. It's not just the bread, but it's who gave it to you. Don't just look for a free lunch. Look for food that endures. Okay? So we get back to our little kids that were down here earlier and everything that they wanted, and they talked about I mean, they're asking for food all the time, let's be honest, right? I mean, you feed them lunch, and then half an hour later, they're like, can I have a snack? And you give them a snack. Or you do this number, you try to stretch them out. Okay, I'll give you a snack at snack time, at this time. At 2 o'clock, I'll give you a snack, okay? Get your snack. And then, when's dinner? Okay, well, I'm working on dinner right now, okay? And then after dinner's over, can I have a snack before bed? It just goes on and on. And Jesus says, yeah, there's a reason for that. God made people to need nourishment, to want it, to always be asking for it, but He wants you to have food that endures. It's different than just the bread and the fish that I gave you. The hunger that you have is leading you to something more. Okay? Look for food that endures. And they understood He was talking about more than just bread, so they asked Him what they must do. And Jesus simply says, hey, this is the work of God, verse 29, that you believe in Him who was sent. They said, okay, you say that God sent you? Prove it. Show us some works, show us some sign that you are the one that God has sent. And we're like, didn't He just feed thousands of people from a little boy's lunch? You guys read that, right? You weren't asleep when I read that to you? Do you remember that? I remember that. I get bored with myself, and I remember what I said. Okay? He just did an incredible miracle, and they come to Him and say, okay, if you want us to believe, then prove it. Show us some sign. So somebody that sees a miracle like that and comes and asks for another miracle, are they really ready to believe? Or do they just want a free lunch out of the deal? Well, they ask for this. And the crowds remember back to a story about bread in the Old Testament. Think back to Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. Think about these books. God had delivered Israel out of the bonds of Egypt, out of slavery. And He brought them to Mount Sinai, and there they became His people. And at the foot of that mountain, God changed them from a bunch of slaves to a united nation with laws and with military strength and with a distinctive way of worship. How did the nation of Israel survive in the wilderness for 40 years before they went into the promised land? Well, God gave them bread from heaven every day. That's how. And they called this manna. Manna literally means, what is it? They'd wake up in the morning and they'd see all this stuff laying out. They're like, what is that? And some kid has already eaten it, and they're like, don't touch that. Well, is it okay? What is that stuff? I don't know, it tastes good. Okay, and so they collected manna. God brought that to them every day. And so they would go and they would collect that, and it would sustain them for the day. But God said, don't try to collect more than just that day's worth. If you do, it's going to spoil. You just need to trust me every day that I'm going to provide the daily bread that you need. Not to abundance, but enough. And the Old Testament reminds them here that God was the one that fed them. God was the one that gave them daily bread. So while they were living in that wilderness where death could easily come to them at any time, God gave them every day this life in the form of bread from heaven. And so in a similar way, Jesus had given the huge crowd bread from heaven, and everyone was filled and satisfied, but it seems they're missing the point. In the Old Testament, they looked to Moses as the giver of the bread, and now Jesus is saying, don't look to Moses. Look to God. He's the one that's giving it to you. Look to the Lord. And Jesus finally breaks through to them, I think, because every one of them were tired of eking out their meager existence on their own, and they're ready for something that's going to give them real joy in life, something full of meaning and purpose and joy. And in verse 34, they say, Sir, give us this bread always. When you get to a point in your life where you're tired of the disappointments and the betrayals and the loss and the meaninglessness of stuff, and you find something that is true and good, you say, that's what I want. And that's what they were saying. Give us this bread always. Okay? And then that's when Jesus gets to our phrase. Look at chapter 6, verse 35. Jesus says to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose nothing of all that he has given me, but raise it up on the last day. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks on the Son and believes in him should have eternal life, and I will raise him up on that last day. Jesus says, I am that bread of life that you are seeking. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry. It's the peanut butter and jelly sandwich that will finally satisfy forever. Okay, that sounded blasphemous. Jesus is not a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It is the meal, it is the bread that finally satisfies when nothing else will. When everything else leaves you hungry, Jesus will satisfy. And just like Israel in the wilderness receiving that life from heaven, Jesus says, I am that life. I am. Regarding the sign that they asked for a while ago, Jesus says, hey, here's a sign. I'm going to lay down my life in accordance with the Father, and I'll raise it up again. That's a sign you can look for. And those who believe in him will also be raised in the last day. Jesus is talking about here something that's coming, the miracle that's going to change everything. Here's a sign. I will be betrayed. I will suffer. I will die. I will die on a cross as an insurrectionist, the lowest form of crucifixion. That's going to be me, but that's not the end of it. On the third day, I'll raise up to new life again, and everyone else who believes in me will be raised up too. That's the sign to look for. Okay, now we're going to bring this chapter home here. Look at verse 41 through 58. So the Jews grumbled about him because he said, I'm the bread that comes down from heaven. They said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How does he now say, I've come down from heaven? Jesus answered them, do not grumble among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father has sent me, draws him. And I will raise him up on that last day. It is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father except he who is from God. He has seen the Father. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I'm the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. The Jews then disputed among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus says to them, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever feeds on me, he also will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like the bread the fathers ate and died. Whoever feeds on this bread will live forever. So these I am statements Jesus makes put a choice before the crowds, like we've been talking about here. They've heard him say, I am the bread of life. And some are still thinking about him. And some aren't buying it at all. Jesus? Bread? Eat of him? Whoever eats of him will live? Disgusting. I mean, whoever heard of such a thing? And we can kind of scoff because we're sitting here going, oh, we know what he's talking about with bread and his blood. Totally makes sense. But if you heard that in that time and Jesus said, hey, whoever eats of my flesh and drinks my blood, that person can be with me. But if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part of me. If you heard that in that crowd, it might be a hard thing to understand. It might be a hard thing to grasp. But Jesus makes this statement, again, to kind of separate people. People are saying, this teaching's difficult. Who can accept it? Some people said, I'm out. I draw the line at being a cannibal. I'm done. And others are thinking, he can't really be meaning eat his flesh and drink his blood. He means something else. I want to understand better. And they come a little closer to Jesus to try to keep listening and learning. So in this statement he makes about himself, he's dividing again. Make a choice. Am I who I am? Who I say I am? Or am I not? Which side are you going to take here? And a few stick around, a lot leave. The crowds greatly decrease in number from 20,000 down to a few after hearing all of this. And Jesus looks around and you can see his disciples there. How about you guys? You going to go too? I didn't read this, but in verse 68, Peter says, Lord, to who can we go? You have the words of eternal life. We've come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. It's like Peter saying, I don't understand what you're saying here, but we know what you're saying is true. We're sticking with you. We want to understand better. Okay? So like the crowds that followed Jesus in the story, we're tagging along behind Jesus too. If you're a disciple of Jesus, you're following, you're wanting to learn, you hear what he says, his teachings, you've seen what he's done, and you're wanting to learn as well. But I wonder, what are we after? Do we want to see a healing? Do we want to see an exorcism? Do we just want a free lunch? I hear potluck is good sometimes. Well, Jesus doesn't want disciples who are just after a free lunch or disciples that want to be entertained. Jesus wants disciples that will listen to his difficult teachings and will stick around to understand them more. Jesus wants disciples who truly believe in him and trust him. I am the bread of life. This is a difficult metaphor for us to identify with today. After all, if you're not a kid that wants to eat all the time, when was the last time you went hungry? I mean, I hear from my kids all the time, I'm starving, Mom. And my kids will quickly say, Dad always like, yeah, don't say I'm starving, because Dad's like, you're not really starving, okay? Starving, I know what starving is, I'm sorry, okay? We can throw that word around, but we really have no clue as to what real hunger feels like, probably, in our society today. Here's some real statistics of what some of the world feels like today. Worldwide, about 850 million people currently live below the international poverty line. That's $1.90 a day. And about 690 million people worldwide are going to go to bed on an empty stomach tonight. More than 25,000 people in the world die every day from starvation. 10,000 of those 25,000 are children. We don't know what real hunger is, but a big portion of the world does. And if you're one of those 690 million people who go hungry in the world, the statement, I am the bread of life, means something a whole lot different than it does to us. Starving people want bread that brings life. Bread means I won't die today. So maybe for us it's a different thing. After all, if I'm hungry, I just go to my pantry, or I go to the fridge, or I walk down the street to the Merc, and I can get what I want right here and right now. So I don't think too much about bread or getting some food to make it through the day. But we do think a lot about life. We've had our fill of everything that this life has to offer, you know? Whether it's money, jobs, power, acceptance, luxury, comfort, whatever. We've had our taste of those things in our life, and we still find ourselves hungry, that it doesn't quite satisfy completely. So we do think about life, and we wonder about the things that really satisfy, because everywhere we look and listen, voices promise good life, use this product, be a part of this group, live this lifestyle, but none of them satisfy. And then I hear the words of Jesus in Matthew 5, verse 6, when he says, Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. The only thing that will satisfy our hunger and thirst in life is the righteousness of God, the bread of life. So I ask you today, are you hungry for real life? Are you hungry for real meaning and purpose and joy in your life? Are you hungry to be saved? Jesus says, I'm the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Are you hungry today? Jesus invites you, come follow me, and I will give you life.